Welcome to the Monster in My Head show, a podcast where we talk to real people about the real insecurities and issues a lot of us face and discuss the unique ways to overcome them. I am your host, Bree, and today we are having a conversation rather than an interview, so thank you for joining the conversation. Today, we are going to be talking to one of my lovely close friends, Jen Chan. Jen is from New York, currently lives in LA, and she is a consultant at McKinsey. So, Jen, hi, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on this wonderful show.
Yeah, so glad you're here. So today, I kind of want to do an overview of what we're going to be talking about. So today's episode is really all about the fear that comes with career changes. And kind of in that world, it's also discussing how a lot of us feel like our careers define us, how we need to have a career path figured out really early. And also just kind of like the idea of figuring out what we want to do with our lives and how intrinsically our career is attached to that. So I think I'd love to start with kind of a question of, especially since you work in the business world, you work with a lot of people in business, a lot of companies, as well as for yourself. Why do you think careers are such a central part of our identity?
Yeah, I love that question. I think it comes down to two different parts where it's one external and two internal.
Mm-hmm.
So on the external front, right, when you meet a person, and this happened all the time in New York, the first question that asks you is, "Oh, what do you do?"
Yep.
And it's such an innocent question, but depending on where you are in your place, if you love your job or not, it is a very easy way to label someone. But at the same time, when you use that label on yourself, then you start thinking, oh, this is my identity. And I think at that point, if you love your job, that's wonderful. You're proud, right? You love talking about it. But I have a lot of friends where their job is just the way that they make money. And so when you start talking about, oh, what do you do? And they're an accountant and they may not love it. And you go on and on for 20 minutes, they honestly don't feel great about that conversation. And I think a second part of it is depending on how many hours you spend on your job, it could be 12 hours plus, and your mindset, your values, your actions that you take, the people that you meet are all impacted from those 12 hours. And so it's hard if you're not doing anything else beyond your job to think about anything else.
I found this really interesting quote, and I say this in a lot of the episodes. Whenever I do an episode, I want to kind of bring statistics into it to let people know, like, what we're dealing with, that we're not alone in a lot of this. And a research on millennials in the workplace in 2022 revealed that they're 3 times more likely to change jobs in a year than their elders are. And also the median tenure for millennials aged 25 to 34 was 2.8 years. So the fact that we're coming into conversations, meeting people, being like, what do you do? When so many of us are changing jobs so quickly, changing career paths, I think it's really kind of, like you said, setting up our relationships for failure in a way, because we're changing all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it also is it's interesting that it's such an easy way to identify people, but at the same time, I think when you have such an easy identifier, such as, oh, you're an architect or you're a doctor, I feel like a lot of our preconceived notions of that role come into play because you assume, oh, if you're an accountant, you just stay in your closet or the basement. You don't have social skills. But I have so many accountant friends who they're the most outgoing people that I know. And so I think when you start off knowing someone, not of their easy to identify name, but something about themselves, it's a lot easier to get to know them with an open mind.
That's really cool. And what do you think when it comes to the way that we think about ourselves? Because I know for me, like, I've grown up kind of doing one thing for a very long time. I've been an artist for a very long time. I love it, but I also have realized recently how many other things that I enjoy doing and how many other interests and hobbies that I have. So like you said, when I just introduce myself as an artist, it doesn't really like take into consideration all these different things that I'm able to bring to the table. So what would you suggest for someone who's kind of in this place where they're working a job and they're like, you know what, like, I don't actually like doing this anymore, but I've built so much of my life. I spent so much time in this one field, but now I feel like I have this need to possibly go explore different parts of myself and different parts of like the potential that I have to do other things. Like, How would, if if you were talking to a friend that was doing that, how would you
Hmm.
encourage them to not be necessarily afraid or overcome that fear in that process, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I always think career switches can be super tough. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot easier to give the advice to actually go and execute, because with
Mm-hmm.
that it comes not only with knowing what resources that you have, but also the mindset. So I think
Mm-hmm.
first off is just establishing the mindset that we are so young, right? Even when
Mm.
you're 30, 40, 50. For example, my dad, he retired, but he realizes that he's in like retiring, so he wants to go out to the job market again and pivot
Mm.
careers. And
Love
so
that.
if he's 60 and can do it, all of us can do it. So I think establishing that we will get there, it just will take time, effort, and an action plan. So once
Mm.
we have that in mind, thinking through, okay, I had this career and I have these skill sets and these values, but what am I actually interested in? Right? So
Mm.
I would encourage everyone to take, even if it's just 10 minutes, start writing down your journal in bullet point form. Every single thing that you're interested in. It can be as simple as food, right?
Mm.
And I say that because when I was at NYU Stern, which is a very pre-professional undergrad where everyone went basically onto Wall Street, there's a lot of my friends that actually did not want to do finance at all. And they did exactly that, where they listened to their hearts and said, okay, well, I'm interested in eating. So what can I do there? And so one of my friends actually took a food science class. And at first he wanted to go into tech, but now he actually created his own platform on TikTok with millions of views. And so he
That's
really
awesome.
went after what he was interested in. And the third step with that is, once you identify what you're interested in, it could be something that you think is silly, but makes a big
Mm.
impact in your life. Then it's going out and seeing what is out there, because there's so many jobs that I had no idea about, whether it's, if you're interested in fashion and you want to mix it with business, you can be a merchandising planner. And so there's so many
Mm.
intersections that I
Mm.
think only until you're actually in the field will you know, right? Because even my parents, their job is they work for the MTA. It's such a niche field. Did I ever imagine other people working as computer scientists for a transportation company? No. But I think
Interesting.
it's taking the time. And once you find the intersection of your interest and what's out there, then it's thinking through, how do I actually make this happen?
Mm. Such a great answer. And there was so much in that that I want to unpack. Well, I think the first thing that you mentioned about how like your dad is in his 60s and he's like, I want to do something different. I don't like retirement. I want to like go into something else.
Yeah.
I think we have, and I've talked about this in other episodes, but I think we, especially as millennials, have this pressure on our shoulders. And I think we put it on ourselves, but I think society puts it on us as well, to have everything figured out and like plant ourselves in one
Mm-hmm.
place in one direction and stay there for the rest of our lives. But I actually really think that it is so rare that that happens. And I almost think that in some ways, like, I mean, yes, it can be a good thing, but if you are so set in one direction and you don't allow yourself to explore other areas, it might prevent you from growing even. So it's like this whole idea of like, I need to figure things out right now, figure out what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life, I think is actually very limiting. So having this kind of mindset of like, you can change careers at any point in your life. And like you said,
Yeah.
figuring out, okay, what do I like now? Who have I become? What unique skill sets have I developed in the last however long of working in this one area? And how can I then evolve into maybe moving into a different career path that utilizes all these skills that I have now that I didn't have before? Does that make sense?
Definitely. And as you're saying this, I reflect on my own career. And I think that principle has applied throughout the three different jobs that I already had. And
Mm.
it's interesting because you would think, oh, I need to specialize in my own field to get ahead. But I actually
Mm.
found that I was the most successful in my roles because I was able to use transferable skill sets from the past job that no one else has. And
Mm.
that made me stand out, and that made me build upon my skill sets because I saw the connections between all the other industries that I was in.
Oh my God. I love that because I think I've told you about this book. I've talked about this book, I think, 3 times in the last like couple of conversations I've
Yeah.
had. But the book Range by David Epstein talks exactly about that, about how our society, it is so convinced that early, especially early specialization, is how you get ahead. But what studies have actually shown is that when you specialize really early, it can allow you to get a head start when you're out of university initially. But then people who actually take a little bit of time early on to explore a lot of different options will have a more sustainable career path later on, because they have so many different kinds of skill sets that allow them to
Mhm.
do so many different kinds of things, which I find really interesting. And that doesn't mean that if someone specializes early that they are unable to have that, but I think it should like give hope and solace to people who have tried a lot of different things and be like, oh my god. For me, for example, I have been, oh my god, what have I've done so many different things. I've done sales in tech. I went to like a coding boot camp. I've
Mm.
been an artist. I have worked in operations, the company that I'm at right now. I'm a dueling piano bar player. I've done all these different kinds of things. And for a long time, I was like, I can't seem to make up my mind
Yeah.
about what I want to do with my life. But then I was like, especially in the job that I have now working in operations, I was like, oh my God, all these different areas, all these different things that I did have made me a really unique asset to the company that I'm at right now. And I've kind of made myself a really important part of this business because I bring so much different skill sets, so many different ways of thinking about the role
Mhm.
that maybe other people wouldn't. And that's what makes me unique, right?
Definitely. And to make it even more tangible too, as you're listing out all of the awesome roles and jobs that you're a part of, it brings in mind 2 points where one, you learn really quickly, Brie. Like I remember our
Mm.
conversations about business and everything that you're saying that you saw in your own real-time life was a class that I took. And so I think it's really
That's
impressive
cool.
that you have this hunger for learning, and I think that's in itself is a skill set that people should always carry across. And
Mm.
second, all these jobs make you unique, but also make you so interesting. And I think that's a
Mm.
part of a
Mm.
job that I always forget where, yes, to get an interview, you have to check certain boxes. You have to get the right GPA, you have to have the right previous job. But when you
Mm.
get to the interview, and if you really want that next step of your career and your job, it's just being a really interesting person. And I
Mm.
feel like this concept of can you pass the airplane test has always been around, but it's so true where do you want to sit next to this person and hire them to be on your team?
Ooh, that is really cool. And what's cool about that too is that you literally just experienced this because you've gotten into some of the best business schools recently that are out there, which is amazing. And I think you're literally
Yeah.
using this exactly. So the whole idea of, I think that a lot of people are like, okay, if I can just get all the information about a job and just make myself the perfect fit for it, that means that people are going to want to hire me. But like what you're saying
Mhm.
is like, getting the kind of job that you want is going to require more than just knowledge about your field. It's like, who are you as a person? So I really like that. So I mean, even let's ask, talk about your interviews with your business schools you just got into. If you want to mention which
Yeah.
ones they are or not, doesn't matter. But what were the things that you were kind of focusing on when talking to these interviewers, and what were you wanting to showcase about who you are alongside the knowledge that you have, which obviously was successful in getting you into these schools?
Yeah, I think a big part of that is being very confident and knowing who you really are as a person, what you value, what your
Mm,
interests are,
hmm.
and being true to that because of course you can research, right? Like for example, I got into Booth. So I can go
Hmm.
online and research, oh, what are the characteristics that Booth really cares about? And that's helpful
Mm,
information. But I
hmm.
think when you're choosing among a bunch of different schools, it's also giving yourself the service of figuring out what school actually fits you.
Mm,
So I've
huge.
always had this philosophy in life where I keep in mind three different adjectives of myself. So this started in high school where one of my friends, we were having this deep conversation about who we're going to be after high school. And she kept on reinforcing the fact that we choose who we are. Like there, of course,
Mm,
you may have certain characteristics when you're born, such as if you're more introverted, extroverted, but at the end of the day, you can always work towards who you want to be. And
mm.
so I've always had three in mind since I was in high school, and those were a bit more silly. But
Oh, I love
now,
them. Tell me.
um, yeah, when I was younger, I wanted to be one fabulous. After watching High School
Yes.
Musical, too kind, and I forgot
Oh.
the third one. But now, right, I always keep in mind my three, which is one, empathetic, two,
Mm,
authentic, and three, engaging. And so
mm,
as I sat down with that interviewer, I wanted to showcase those because those were the three adjectives I was super proud of. And I think by being, right, very authentic around who I was, someone across the table from me saw that and said, "Wow,
mm,
this girl, she knows herself really well,
mm.
and she is empathetic. She is authentic. She is engaging because those are the traits that I have worked on for, the past 3 or 4 years and really kept in mind. And I think that's what helped me stand out because I was someone that he could see actually in his community, actually being someone who wants to help other people."
Mm. That's super awesome. And I think something that you said that I want to like point out is you talked about how when you're interviewing with these business schools, when you're interviewing with a job, you also want to figure out where you are the best fit. I think a lot of
Hmm.
times like in our culture right now, and I see this with social media, which I bring up a lot, but even in job interviews, we come in like, please want us. Please
Hmm.
want me, which makes sense because a lot of times like the job market is really hard. It's hard to get a good job, but I think that if we are able to come in with a level of confidence, like you were saying, of like, I know what I have to offer. I'm also interviewing you. Like when we're talking about the job, I'm also trying to see if I'm a good fit because I know what I can bring to the table. And I'm not here begging you to give me a chance because I feel like, I mean, at least in my experience, like I feel like recruiters and different people in business can recognize when you're just like, I just really need this job. And sometimes it's really hard not to be like that, especially if you are in a desperate situation. But
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like from your experience, you've seen that confidence tends to be the thing that gets people actually excited about you as like someone who can build into the culture, right?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of, and when I say confidence, because this word has been very important in my life, but
Mm,
sometimes it takes me time to break down what that actually means to myself.
mm,
And so confidence to me, and we touch upon this, means being very comfortable in your own skin and not being
mm,
afraid to show that to other people.
mm,
And when I say that, and I want to emphasize that definition of how I view it, it's because it's fine to be on the shy side, right? If you show up to an interview and you're more on the quiet, reserved side, that's actually still okay. But it's
mm,
just knowing, being very intentional around your path and also showcasing to someone else that you did your research and you know why you would be a good fit with that company or that school.
mm,
So being very self-assured around yourself, because if you don't know, right? Like let's say I came into the interview with the mindset of, "Oh, I don't know if I want to go to business school. I don't know if Booth is the right choice for me." Someone else
mm,
is going to pick up on that energy and think, "Okay, if this girl doesn't even know why she wants to be here, why should I have faith in her even getting a spot in the school?"
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I think I want to go back to something that you had mentioned before about
Yeah.
intersectionality. So you had, because if we're, in this conversation, we're talking a lot about, okay, if we want to get into a certain job or get into a certain school, which I think is super important. But then what about the people, like we were talking about before, who are like, I don't really see a fit in the existing industry right now. I kind of want to possibly make something for myself. Obviously, that can be a really scary thing of, identifying where do my skills lie? How can I, either create a job or find a job that maybe I don't know exists right now? What would be your advice to someone who is like trying to kind of find that? Because, like, if you don't know that a job exists, how do you search for it? How do you figure out where you could fit into it, if that makes sense?
Definitely. I I can see how someone who has a lot of different interests or skill sets, it almost seems like they're gonna face analysis paralysis, right? Because
I 1000% face that a lot.
and even bringing it to personal choices, right? It's, oh, let's say you go to brunch and you want to have the acai bowl, but you also want the eggs and you don't know, right? I think in life, similar to how Nike says, just do it, is really focusing on
Mm,
one aspect first,
mhm,
getting really good at that one thing, because we can't juggle 10 different balls. We unfortunately have only a certain
mhm,
number of days in the month. And so it's
mhm,
picking that one, prioritize it, and build a platform around it. And this is going to be a very simple and obvious example, but think about huge companies today, such as Amazon. It started off as a bookstore, which is insane.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, it does everything from shipping, packaging to they were trying to go into healthcare and they own a
Yeah.
grocery store.
They own
And so
Whole Foods. I'm
it's,
just like,
they own the world.
what?
Yeah.
Yes, seriously.
So I'd say our lives are building blocks. So really just go for one that you know is the most interesting to you and the most secure. And then from there, you can continue to build yourself and build your brand.
That's huge. I love that advice. And I think I remember talking to you about this for myself, and I think you gave me similar advice. For me personally, I relate to that because I know that when I was starting this project, I'm doing a lot of different things with it. I'm, creating an album, I do this podcast, I'm like writing a book, I'm doing all this stuff, but it's all in the same vein. But I know that when I was working on all this, there was a part of me that was feeling really afraid of like, okay, I'm putting all this time, all this effort into this one thing. What if it doesn't work? Maybe I should also be focusing on, do I want to go get my master's? Do I want to go to business? What would it look like to maybe go into the field of research? Kind of already planning for other things based on maybe fear that what I'm doing right now might not lead to the kind of results that I maybe would hope. But then I stop myself because I've done that a lot, and I've kind of run away from things a lot, so it's like if I
Yeah.
got fear, I'd move to a different country, or I'd just be like,
Yeah.
I have to leave. But something that I've definitely been really challenging myself to do is be like, I'm, like you said, doing this one thing right now. This is the thing that I'm focusing on. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability and then see what happens. And then after I allow enough time for the results to come in, then I can make a decision from that point forward if I want to continue down this path or if I want to do something else. I think the whole idea of kind of finishing what you start is a big deal and something that I'm trying to teach myself right now.
Yeah, I think it's very tough too because you never know what is out there. And I think in our generation, we get a lot of FOMO. We start on something and we look at someone else's social media and think, wow, how cool would it be if I could make my own travel blog and start traveling too?
Girl, you read my mind. I've thought that before.
Exactly.
Just get on a plane.
And my dad loves to say all these mini allegories, but his favorite one is, imagine we're just miners, right? And we're digging tunnels for years and years. And it's almost a question of when should we stop digging? Because the diamonds could be, within your next 4 or 5 dig, but if you stop now, you're never going to know. So to me, it's almost when you stop early too, you're not reaching your full potential because you never know when it's that last hour in the day where that clicks and the magic happens.
Totally. And I'll add to that too, because I think sometimes when people hear that, they can think, okay, that means I have to work myself to death. I know that I used to think that, but what I'm finding for myself is that finishing projects means making sure that I'm doing it in a sustainable way, that I can keep doing it for a long time. Because for a while in my life, I would start these projects and I would work super hard for, like hours and hours and hours and just grind it out. But then it would get to a point where I would be burned out and I'd be like, I can't, I don't have the motivation, I don't have the emotional energy to do this anymore, which would then cause me to stop. So something that I'm kind of learning for myself is like, okay, if I need to finish this project, which is something I set a goal for myself, how can I shape my life in a way that I can make this a sustainable effort for myself while also at the same time not sacrificing the rest of my life to this pursuit, making sure to have those healthy relationships, making sure that you are taking time for your mental and physical and spiritual health. I think that's an important part of the journey too. Have you at least seen that for yourself?
Yeah, I resonate with a lot of what you're saying because when you're not investing in your own personal life, there's no way that you can grow professionally too, right? Because it's as simple as I used to not be able to sleep more than 7 hours. I used to have 5 hours of sleep, right? That's, I think, one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves is to get at least 8 hours.
Yes.
And I saw that impact the way that not only I performed, but also the way that I just felt about my job. I started to resent the fact that I had to get up at 7 a.m. and go to bed at 3 a.m., right? And that's just not sustainable. And it's not fair to yourself or to the job because who knows, maybe if I was able to get 8 or 9 hours and really took the time to tell my team, hey, this is non-negotiable. I need to go to bed by a certain hour.
Hmm.
Maybe I could have been a top performer, right? And so it's
Wow.
setting yourself up for what you need, because we all know what we need, but it's making sure that other people know, because who knows, maybe my boss was able to function at 6 hours a day and that's just her life, but she doesn't know that that's what I needed. And so being very clear and vocal around it could help us both on our jobs, but also just be the person that we are meant to be.
Absolutely, it's setting boundaries because you're like
Yeah.
you're advocating for yourself because you are the only person who knows what you need. And I love this idea, and I think you're absolutely right, of recognizing that if you are not functioning at your best internally, mentally, you don't have enough sleep, you are, feeling stressed, you are not going to perform to the level that you want to perform to your highest potential. And I think,
Exactly.
at least from what I've seen, I've seen a lot of these self-help gurus and a lot of these like motivational people who are just like, I work 15 hours a day. I wake up at 4 in the morning every morning. I go to bed at 2. And it's like, bro, like
Yeah.
that's not like, that sounds cool in theory. How long are you going to be able to do that for? How long are you going to be able to go into your job or be working on your business and feel happy about what you're doing? Like, that is not creating a sustainable lifestyle. So I love this idea of, you know, maybe sitting back for a second and be like, okay, what areas of my life right now do I feel like are lacking? How am I
Hmm.
feeling? How, like, physically, emotionally, how are my relationships right now? And maybe even taking some time to like make some adjustments based on what you're seeing kind of needs some help. And then just observing how well you do in your job or in your business that you're creating. Cause I have a feeling that you'll probably do better, I imagine.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because with your point of writing down things that you know you need, sometimes it's even hard to do that. And so I would encourage people to get a list of all the things that you do in your life, whether it's relationships, right?
Mm.
Thinking about your finances, thinking about your parents, and then just experiment with, maybe in that moment you think you don't need to reach out to your parent, but just try doing it anyways and see how that feels afterwards, because our
Mm.
lives is all about experimentation. And while, we've been with ourselves for the last 20 to 30 years, sometimes you may surprise your own self and realize that what you need is something that you actually don't know yet.
Absolutely. And also, you might not have needed it before, but as you continue to grow as a person, you might need it now. And that's something that I've realized for myself. I'm like, I've grown a lot, even in the last year. I've grown so much. So some of the things that I need now are things that I didn't need before, and vice versa. You know, um, I want to kind of pinpoint something that you had said about experimentation.
Hmm.
So, something that I have struggled with in my past is, kind of having a direction and then getting this idea of something else that I want to do and being like, okay, is this a healthy pivot into something else because my time in this position or doing this thing has naturally and organically come to an end? Or is this me running away because I'm feeling
Hmm.
scared? I'm feeling unsure about my direction in my life. I've done this even recently. I'm working on this project and I'm like, I'm going to go to the Peace Corps. I don't know what you're talking about, but like, screw all this. I'm leaving for 2 years. And I'm like, no, that's coming from a place of fear. So, at least, I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this as well, but like, how would you say you can differentiate between when you are wanting to make an organic pivot based on how you've grown as an individual, or if you are running away from what you're currently doing that's actually challenging you in a good way, but it's
Mm.
it's scaring you and you're kind of wanting to escape it?
Yeah, I love that. For me, it comes down to metrics, right? Because that's always very objective and quantifiable and something
Mm.
that you can't really lie to yourself about.
Yeah.
And to me, a metric with careers is skill sets. So
Mm.
this may be more towards corporate jobs than artistic jobs, because depending on what you're trying to achieve in that job, if you want to reach a certain level of musical skill sets, we can view it from that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's being very intentional when you're in that job and thinking, I have this opportunity to use this job as a platform to learn XYZ. So
Mm.
to make it more concrete for my job, right, I came in thinking, I want to learn one, how to communicate really well, two, how to build relationships with clients, and three, how do I get up to speed with industries? And
Mm,
so let's say I started becoming fearful around, okay, well, I feel like I get nervous when I speak a lot during meetings. Maybe I should switch jobs, right? That is easily identifiable as I'm just running away if I want to switch jobs from that because I came in with those three ideas of the skill sets that I
mm,
want to build, and
that's good.
that's my opportunity to do so. But I'm
Mm,
running away because I still haven't built that. So I would say think about the intentions of why you wanted to do that job when you first signed up, and then
mm,
measure yourself against that performance. And if you think that, oh, I already got check marks in all of these three parts, I'm ready to learn and grow somewhere else, amazing, that's beautiful. But if you're like me and you hesitate and thought, oh, I'm kind of scared of this meeting, or oh, I'm kind of scared of this next path, well, buckle in because you still have lots of room to grow in that
wow.
space. And this is your
Mm,
one opportunity to do so before you move on.
mm, girl, that's so much wisdom because you're totally right. I mean, and I think this kind of goes into one of my next questions of like what should we value in our work? I think that's the main thing of being like, okay, in this job that I'm doing right now, have I learned everything that I possibly can from this position? Have I
Exactly.
What are the ways that I was, like you said, looking to challenge myself? Have I exploited those areas as much as I can to grow as much as I possibly can? And if so, where can I then move in order to continue my growth? Even maybe looking at where you're at right now and being like, okay, what are the other areas that I have to grow? Based on these areas that I have to grow, where can I go to help develop me as a person? Which I think is kind of scary to think about because it's very uncomfortable. It's like we sometimes I think want to go into jobs and be like feel really secure and comfortable, which is totally fine. But I think, and we could talk about this a little bit more,
Yeah.
the value that we get from our jobs not only should be monetary, but I think it should also be to help us grow as individuals. So I think you had mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I'd love to hear more from you. Like, what else do you think can we really look for when we are looking for a position or trying to create a position for ourselves? Like, what value should we be getting out of our work where we're not identifying as our job, but we are seeing our job as a way to continue to build into us, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. As we both are nerds with professional development and personal development,
Yeah.
um, I think with the job, because obviously as humans, we have jobs
Mm-hmm.
for having money so that we can live. But outside of extrinsic motivations, right, when we talk about intrinsic, it's one, how do you actually feel on the job, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I think feelings and emotions tell us a lot about how we're operating in that
Mm-hmm.
role and can lead to either your success or your, you know, lower performing based off of just your mindset on the job, right? So
Mm-hmm.
just ask yourself, on an average day, am I feeling good or am I feeling bad, right? Because then those are signals to dig deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Second is thinking about your own values in life and if you're able to actually exhibit that throughout your job. Because
Mm-hmm.
if your value, let's say, is in sustainability, and that's what you truly care about, creating a world in which generations to come can really live and prosper over nature. But your job is helping companies that are in the coal mines. You're not going to be
Mm-hmm.
happy with what you're doing
Mm.
for the world and
There's
the
cognitive
impact.
dissonance there for sure.
Exactly. And the third, I would say, and I feel like our generation loves to use this word of impact, but really, how are you making either a personal impact on someone directly or contributing to the world? Because
Mm.
not to make it very philosophical and deep, but right, when we think about, hopefully it's later in the years, but when, let's say, you take your last 5 minutes to really reflect on this world before you leave, and you ask yourself, what did I leave on this world? And if
Mm-hmm.
you're proud of that answer, that's amazing. And if you think to yourself, well, I wish I left more knowledge, I wish I left something more tangible, then it's reevaluating what you're doing on an everyday basis to build up to that 30, 40, 50 years down the road.
Mm. Oh, I love that. I love it when you come in with tangible tips that we can use? Because I think that that's so important, so that we can like talk about all this stuff, but then have these tangible kind of ideas that we can kind of put into our lives. So when you had said like, how do you feel about the job, the values, your impact? What if someone is at their job right now and they're like, oh my God, those three things are out of alignment for me. I'm not happy. I don't feel like I'm making an impact. And I feel like this job is not aligned with the values that I have. How would you encourage them to develop the courage that they need in order to look for something else? And what would you say would be kind of the best steps to kind of make that leap in a different direction when they're kind of dealing with the fear and insecurity that would come from that?
Yeah. I I think when we are facing fear, the most helpful way to think about fear is almost, what am I actually fearful of? Right. And
Mm,
so, to use an example before I apply it to the career context, let's say you are trying to, you're facing a decision of your health. And you either, right, like let's say you're not eating that healthy and you have this fear that you don't really know where your health is going to end up, right? It's like, okay, I have this fear of, and I'm really overwhelmed. I don't really know how to decide on my health choices. What do I do? And thinking through, what are you actually fearful of? Are you fearful of the fact that you may not walk your daughter or son down the aisle? Or are you more fearful of not knowing what steps to take? And I think when we actually identify the real fear, you can
mm,
almost help your minor fear get overcome because you have a bigger fear to worry about that will help you actually take action, right? So it's
mm,
on the career front, it's okay, I'm fearful of taking action, but I'm also fearful of not living up to my own potential. So if you think about it that way, most of us will say, yeah, I'm more afraid of not living up to my full potential. So let me take a step back and think, how do I actually take action to not let that
mm,
real fear come into play?
mm,
And so I think it's always starting from the mindset, and it's really hard to take action, right? Because whether it's you're in a decent paying job and you're fearful of not being able to go out to eat with your friends anymore, or maybe it's, you don't want to quit your job because you don't know what else is in the job market right now. I know it's a scary time because a lot of companies are slowing down hiring,
mm,
but it's a long-term plan. So I would say first just start taking some action, right? Create an action plan. And it may not have to be now in this market, but once the market starts rising up or opportunities start coming out, you can actually start employing your action plan and start on
mm.
this new path.
Mm. I think the whole quote preparation, when preparation meets opportunity, that's usually when things happen. So it's like, yeah, if you don't have the opportunity right now to jump into something else, preparing yourself for that eventual move, knowing where you want to go, knowing why you want to go there, knowing what you want to learn in your next job, and then being prepared for, like you said, when the markets, kind of goes up again, or an opportunity presents itself. I mean, I have friends who, they were starting to do this preparation process without even knowing where they wanted to go, but because they were identifying that within themselves, when this random opportunity that they would have
Mm.
never taken before they did that process came up, they were able to jump on it and be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. They wouldn't have been able to even see that if they hadn't done the work within themselves. So I love that, what you're saying of like taking those small steps to do that initial preparation, maybe, and maybe not jumping out without a plan, because you don't want to like, freak yourself out, but starting that internal process, I think, is huge. um I think one of the last kind of points we can talk about here is this whole fear of the unknown, because there's, I think, so much. I know for myself, and I don't I feel like we've talked about this before. We are both such type A
Mhm.
people. I'm very much a control freak. So I always want to be like, okay, I know exactly what the next steps are. I know, like, I'm going to do this, then this, and it's going to result in this. Um but I kind of want to like bring up a couple examples of people that I've read about that have really inspired me, who kind of jumped into the unknown and then things worked out for them. Like, for example, like Walt Disney was a newspaper cartoonist. He then went to the army, before moving kind of slowly into animation. And then he
Mm.
became obviously freaking Walt Disney.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford was like a carpenter in his 30s before he did Star Wars. Like, and then the last one, Charles Darwin apparently started off as a doctor and then a clergyman and then became interested in biology.
Mm.
And I think it's all because these people were kind of willing to just be like, I don't really know what the next steps are, but I'm just going to kind of like move forward in the best way that I can and not try to control the outcome. And they were kind of like guided to their destiny, I think.
Yeah, I think those are wonderful examples, and it clearly shows that they connected the dots afterwards. They're really leaning
Mm.
into all their interests. And then after when they had the opportunity that we're talking about, it's connecting the dots to then figure out who they
Absolutely.
truly are and reaching their full potential.
Connecting the dots afterwards, I think, is awesome because I know for myself, like I've always tried to connect the dots while it's happening, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I need it to make sense in order to feel confident moving forward. But definitely, when I personally look back on my life, I'm like, oh wow, like all these different things helped train me in
Mhm.
all these different ways, and now it's made me into the person that I am, who is more capable of doing the kinds of things that I want to do in the future. So that's super cool. Um, well, I think we should end with just one last question from you.
Yeah.
If people are in this situation that we're talking about right now, being kind of unsure, a little bit scared, whatever, is there any last piece of advice that you would give to someone who is kind of like, I'm just kind of not sure about what I'm doing right now, I'm scared about the future? Is there any last thing that you would want to say to someone like that?
Yeah, it's life is beautiful. It's scary. We
Mm-hmm.
have one shot of it, right? So it's thinking with the mindset of how can I be the person that I want to be in the future? And even if it is really scary right now, it's just taking action. Because similar to all the jobs that I had, there's no preparation for that job. It's being in the job to actually learn. And so I would say take advantage of life, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
scary, but once you make your first step in it, you'll start feeling comfortable. Then you'll feel scared again, then comfortable, on this roller coaster of emotions. But that's what makes life so special because if we had a perfect life where there's no challenges, no anxiety, no fear, it would be a pretty boring life.
Totally.
And so we view nervousness, sometimes I do this when I speak. If I get nervous, I turn it into excitement because the unknown is really freaky and weird, but also,
Mm-hmm.
right, it can be full of surprises and excitement and interesting people that you'll meet down the road. So I would say, in sum, just do it, take action, be bold, and I'm excited to see who you all will become in the next few years.
I love it. Jen, thank you so much for this conversation. This has been really helpful for me. I think it will be helpful for a lot of different people. So thank you so much for your wisdom and your passion and excitement. Your excitement for your life is so palpable and it's so refreshing to talk with someone who is just like, I don't know what's going to happen, but like it's
Yeah.
cool. Like you don't
Yeah.
come across that a lot. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great. I had a blast. Thanks, Brie.
Yes. Anybody who's listening, if you like the show, please do subscribe, like it, comment it on it if you can, share it if this has been helpful for you. And we will see you next week. Peace.